Shalom, I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you two things. Number one, we're going to give you an update on the efforts of Benjamin Netanyahu to form his next government coalition. And secondly, we're going to look at the current situation with the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. First, the situation with the Israeli elections. The elected parties to the new Israeli government met with President Shimon Peres to recommend to him their choice for who should be the Prime Minister of Israel and thus seek to form a government coalition. Over 80 Knesset members recommended that Benjamin Netanyahu continue to be Prime Minister of Israel. Shimon Peres is expected to ask Netanyahu to seek to form his next government on Saturday night. According to Israeli law, Netanyahu will have 28 days to form a government. If he needs more time, he can ask for an extension up to 14 days. Since the Israeli election results, a new political party in Israel called Yesh Atid, which means there's a future, who is a centrist secular party and who got 19 Knesset seats in the Israeli elections of January the 22nd, has been drawing the most political attention. Yesh Atid recommended that Netanyahu be the next prime minister, and its leader, Yair Lapid, who is a former Israeli journalist, said, Yesh Atid's recommendation that Netanyahu be the next prime minister of Israel does not mean that we will be in his government, but we will work to have a government that has 0 ministers without portfolio, a government that ushers in a more equitable way of sharing the national service burden, which is code talk for drafting ultra-Orthodox Jews into the Israeli military, and also to return to the negotiating table with the Palestinians. Shas, the Sephardic ultra-Orthodox religious party, also recommended that Netanyahu be the next prime minister. Shas leader Eli Yishai said, it is clear that Yair Lapid, the leader of Yesh Atid, there's a future, wants Shas out of the government, despite Netanyahu wanting Shas to be in the government. If Netanyahu wants what is best for Israel, he will prevent a divide in the nation, which would come about if the ultra-Orthodox parties are left out of Netanyahu's coalition and the coalition in power votes to draft ultra-Orthodox yeshiva students, or those who study Torah for a living, into the Israeli military service. Then Shas leader Eli Yishai went on to say, nevertheless, I believe that Shas will end up being in Netanyahu's government. Israel Beitenu, the Russian immigrant party, headed by Avigdor Lieberman, met with the leader of the modern Orthodox nationalistic party Jewish Home and its leader Naftali Bennett to discuss with Jewish Home the different options related to forming the next government. The two leaders discussed the issue of drafting ultra-Orthodox yeshiva students into the Israeli military as Lieberman, that is Israel Beitenu, and Bennett, that is Jewish Home, and Yair Lapid, that is Yesh Atid, seems to be in agreement regarding the draft issue, as they would all like to see Israelis, including yeshiva students and Arabs, be drafted into the Israeli army and perform national service. Labor, a socio-economic party associated with the left wing of Israeli politics, who got 15 seats in the Israeli elections, Labor's leader Shelley Yakimovich has said that Labor will not be in the next government. Without Labor, Benjamin Netanyahu cannot form an exclusive center-left government. And if he did have a center-left government, it would also have to include Jewish Home or one of the ultra-Orthodox parties. Therefore, most likely, Benjamin Netanyahu will have to form a government whose makeup would be Yesh Atid, there's a future, and Jewish Home of Naftali Bennett, that may include one of the ultra-Orthodox parties, or alternatively he can form an exclusive right-wing government with Jewish Home and the ultra-Orthodox parties that excludes Yesh Atid or the secular centrist party of Israeli journalist Yair Lapid. We will find out this month exactly what kind of government Netanyahu will choose. Next, we will share with you the current situation with the peace process. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said that the results of the Israeli elections will not alter the Palestinian demands regarding discussing parameters for a Palestinian state. They will continue to include the following. Number one, a freeze of building Jewish homes in the West Bank. Number two, a release of Palestinian prisoners. Number three, an agreement on the final status issues, including Jerusalem, the refugees, and Israel returning to the 1967 borders, which would include recognizing East Jerusalem as the capital of a Palestinian state. Once Israel forms a government, Abbas desires to go forward with plans to achieve a Palestinian state in stages with the hope of not recognizing Israel as a Jewish state. His plan would include, in its first stage, to seek recognition of a Palestinian state based upon 67 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital at the UN Security Council, where since September of 2011, the United States has threatened to exercise its veto on the matter. In stage two, Abbas plans to use a possible recognition of a Palestinian state based upon 67 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital that would, he hopes, would be adopted through the UN Security Council, which would require the United States and Obama to no longer use their veto as a basis to engage in direct talks with Israel based upon the outline of the prospective UN Security Council resolution that would have support and backing of the international community, where the details of a permanent status agreement with Israel would be worked out. If during this stage Israel continues to insist on its current positions, that would include the Palestinians recognizing Israel as a Jewish state and declaring an end to the conflict and a viable solution that would take into consideration Israel's security needs, that if Netanyahu continues with these demands, that Abbas's plan would be that the international community would impose economic sanctions upon Israel, as was imposed in a similar way to the apartheid government of South Africa in the 1970s. Abbas believes that by implementing this plan, he will be able to give his people an independent state without having to confront Hamas on recognizing the two-state solution, while seeking to avert Palestinian demonstrations over lack of progress in the peace talks in the Palestinian territories. Abbas is also counting on the Obama administration's complete rejection of any presence of Jewish homes in the West Bank, assuming that in Obama's second term as president, he will be less sensitive to the wishes of Israel's supporters in the United States and will not rush to automatically back the Israeli government in the United Nations, which would mean primarily exercising its veto at the UN Security Council, especially over peace process issues. Abbas is counting on the strained relations between Obama and Netanyahu to aid the Palestinian cause. To leverage these things, Abbas is sending some of his ministers for talks in the United States to coordinate positions between senior officials in the Obama administration and Palestinian senior officials. This would include the offices of Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, Defense Secretary, and Ambassador to the United Nations. Hamas leader Khaled Mashal met with King Abdullah of Jordan to discuss Palestinian reconciliation between Hamas and the Fatah faction of Mahmoud Abbas, as well as discussing issues regarding the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Following his meeting with Abdullah, Mashal said, "I am optimistic about Palestinian reconciliation. The international community must respect the Palestinians' need to end division." Regarding the peace process, Mashal said, "A two-state solution is the only means to achieve security and stability in the Middle East." However, Izzat al-Rashek, a senior Hamas official, denied that Hamas has accepted the two-state solution. Yahya Musa, another senior Hamas official, further stated that not only is a two-state solution unacceptable, but reiterated that Hamas will never agree to giving the Zionist state 1 inch of the land of Palestine. Hamas legislator Safa Bardawi further added that there was a difference between accepting a Palestinian state on the 67 borders and recognizing Israel's right to exist, something that he said Hamas would never do. Meanwhile, an Arab League delegation is expected to present the United States with the Mideast peace proposal soon. The proposal will include suggestions on Israeli withdrawal from the West Bank, the establishment of a Palestinian state, and security guarantees for both sides. The United Nations Human Rights Council issued a report which demanded that Israel must withdraw all of its citizens from the West Bank. They said Israel must, in compliance with Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, cease all settlement activities without preconditions. Also, it must immediately initiate a process of withdrawal of all settlers from the occupied Palestinian territories. It also ruled that the Palestinians had a right to go to the International Criminal Court if Israel does not comply. Israel's Foreign Ministry Office replied by saying that the only way to resolve all pending issues between Israel and the Palestinians, including the settlement issue, is through direct negotiations without preconditions. Following the Israeli election results of January the 22nd, U.S. President Barack Obama sent a tough letter to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that demanded progress toward a Palestinian state once Netanyahu forms his next government. Reportedly, Obama asserted that his administration would make significant changes in U.S. policy in the Middle East during his second term, which was viewed as a way to increase the pressure upon Israel. The United States is no longer expected to protect Israel from any international backlash to Jewish settlements in the West Bank. It is expected that the United States will take a harder line with Israel's coming government by switching from a strategy of accommodation to one of confrontation, and will begin the process to start letting down its diplomatic shield for Israel, which would be a reference to reconsidering the threat of a U.S. veto at the UN Security Council, as the Palestinians seek recognition of a state based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital at the UN Security Council. The new Secretary of State and Defense Secretary, John Kerry and Chuck Hagel, will be assigned to criticize Israel and link U.S. economic aid and cooperation to a halt in Jewish settlement building in the West Bank. On January the 29th, the Senate confirmed John Kerry as Secretary of State. Kerry has said that he will visit Israel during the month of February to seek to restart peace talks. When Obama would challenge Israel in these ways, he would also be expected to have the support of the Europeans and the international community. WorldNet Daily is reporting that a top Palestinian negotiator revealed that Obama has already secretly pledged to the Palestinians that he will press Israel into a new round of land for peace negotiations. The Palestinian negotiator said that top members of the Obama administration told the Palestinians that Obama will renew talks aimed at creating a Palestinian state on the 67 borders, meaning the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. The Palestinian negotiator further claimed that Obama quietly pledged the Palestinians a campaign at the United Nations to renew UN Security Council Resolution 242, which calls for a Palestinian state in the 1967 borders, and that a Palestinian state will be one of the main priorities for Obama's second term. If the Palestinians and Israel cannot agree to renew direct peace talks, the Palestinian negotiator said that Netanyahu will be declared the main person responsible for the collapse of the peace process. Finally, newly elected Knesset member Moshe Feiglin of Netanyahu's Likud political party has decided that he will visit the Temple Mount on the 19th of every Hebrew month. By being elected to the Israeli Knesset, he now has diplomatic immunity, which he can exercise without fear of arrest. Jews are forbidden to pray or show outward signs of worship on the Temple Mount due to fears that doing so would anger Muslims praying at the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. The Association of Temple Mount Movements congratulated Feiglin and praised him by saying, "We hope the topic of the Temple Mount remains a top priority for other nationalist Knesset members in addition to Moshe Feiglin." Well, that's going to conclude this week's report, where we shared with you some details regarding the efforts of Benjamin Netanyahu to put together his next government, as well as the current situation with the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Until we do it again, Shalom. In Yeshua the Messiah, Amen.